Modern publishers produce and sell millions of copies of the Bible every year. Who tells them how the Bible should read? Do publishers have access to the original letters that the Bible authors wrote? Well, if not, what do they use? Who makes sure that they get it right? Skeptics often put it another way. Hasn't the New Testament been changed as it's been copied and recopied down through the centuries? Haven't some overzealous monks altered it to, clarify the doctrine? These are questions of transmission. How did we get the Bible that we have? As we study transmission, keep in mind the goal of the study. We are not establishing the inspiration of the Bible. We're just showing that the versions of the Bible we have today are a faithful, accurate reproduction of the Bible as it was originally written. What are the sources for our modern copies of the New Testament? Where do they come from? And do we have the originals? The answer to the last question is no. We don't have the original copies of the New Testament writings, and there are many good reasons for that. Number one is the materials they would have been written on. The New Testament authors would have used papyrus for their letters, which is not much more durable than heavy paper. The manufacture of papyrus dates from about 2500 BC in Egypt. Egypt and Syria became the major producers of papyrus because they had access to the swampy areas where the plant grew. It was cut, soaked, woven, dried, scraped, and joined into rolls. Papyrus was designed to last for years, but not for centuries. It was perishable, so not many are left. Even if original copies did exist, we can imagine what the situation would be. When someone finds an artifact that is supposedly related to Christ, such as things like the Shroud of Turin, notice how the religious world reacts. Man has always been ready to worship the creature rather than the Creator. Glory that is rightfully God's would be misdirected to these letters if any originals actually had been preserved, not to mention the power struggle that would have arisen from finding original copies. If any one man privately possessed such a copy, he could keep it private, withholding it from others. By removing the originals, God made the Bible an open source document, available to everybody to access. Thankfully, originals really are unnecessary. When the New Testament writers circulated their original letters, they were to be read not only in one congregation, but by others. This idea is seen in Colossians 4:16, where Paul commanded the church at Colossae to exchange letters with Laodiceans. Everyone needed to have access to the scriptures. Copies had to be made. The early church produced these copies as they had need, and the copies multiplied themselves until many thousands existed all over the world. Copies are not a bad thing, especially when the document has the type of safeguards that the Bible has built into it. The Bible's designed to be understood, and God made it hard to miss His meaning. Major themes are taught not in one, but in many places in the Bible. The language that is used, it's not difficult to translate. Unlike modern legal jargon, the Bible's written in normal speech with common vocabulary. These types of safeguards give the Bible amazing resiliency and evidence that backs it up. Today there are over 5,500 known Greek manuscripts of the New Testament. In addition, there are at least 18,000 copies of versions, not to say anything of the 86,000 plus quotations from the early church fathers. Bruce Metzger, professor of New Testament language and literature at Princeton, wrote, "The textual critic of the New Testament is embarrassed by the wealth of its material." Dr. F.J.E. Hort was the co-editor of the monumental Westcott Hort version of the New Testament. After spending 30 years analyzing the manuscripts, this is what he said. "The amount of what can in any sense be called substantial variation can hardly form more than 1,000th part of the entire text. Instead of creating confusion, the amount of copies of the New Testament create coherency and consistency. These copies agree with each other in every substantive issue, and the variants are few and far between." But wait, there are variants? The texts don't always say exactly the same thing? Yep, and that is what the next lesson will deal with.